everyone, and welcome to a special interview we have today. My name is Marilyn Mantziaris, and I am president of the philanthropic organization of the Ladies Philoptochos Society. And today with us we have Gloria Pitchell, author of The Dark and the Light Side of the Moon. Welcome, Gloria.
Thank you.
I would like to start off with some of the reviews from your book, The Dark and the Light Side of the Moon.
Okay.
The Dark and the Light Side of the Moon is a shocking, horrifying, and ultimately a life-affirming story of how one man witnessed the genocide of his family and eventually found a safe haven and lived the American dream of success and having a family of his own in the early decades of the 20th century America. It is a captivating family epic set against a sweeping historical background that simply and honestly tells a story of one family, but we can all identify with it as children of immigrants. The dream is still alive as people from around the world continue to see our America as the home of the free. It's a legacy which each of us American citizens can defend as we speak out against the ever-present totalitarian forces within every country and condemn the ongoing genocide around the world. I would like to get a few of your views on that review and comments from you.
Well, that was a very nice review. And it is true that there is genocide around the world even today. But this is a story about my dad who witnessed the brutal murder of his family during the Armenian genocide. So around the world, we see it happening in Syria, we see it happening in many other parts. And the story is about how someone could experience something like this and how they would eventually find happiness. So the dark and the light side of the moon is explaining that from the darkness of life that you come to the light during your life.
Wonderful. A very interesting book it was. Going on to the next review. Another reviewer wrote, I felt moved by the characters from the first chapter, their plight of where they came from, a harsh, unfathomable beginning to move from one generation to the next. Moving, emotional, pulling for the heroes to sadness of passing. Mrs. Pitchell sharing how one family's roots grew out of violent beginnings to become a family tree, blossoming into passions of love for their new country and the Americans they have become, never losing sight of where they began and celebrating where they are today. Easily could this book be adapted into a movie. Highly recommend.
That's very nice. That's very nice. Every author's dream that your book becomes a movie. But I parallel two lives, what happened to my dad and my mother. My mother came from Greece with her mother and her older sister, and they landed on Ellis Island expecting her father to greet them, and he never came. And hours later, a cousin came to greet them and inform them that her father had died that day. So here at 7 years old, they were stranded at Ellis Island, and what was going to happen to them. And after this beginning of her young life, how was she ever going to find happiness? So, as I said, I parallel both lives to adulthood and when they meet each other.
I can't imagine the obstacles and hardships they faced. As a young girl and your father as a...
Right. And also you had, you came from, my mother came from Greece where there were these certain traditions that you had to follow. And now you've come to a new country and you're, say, a young girl, years past, you're a young girl, and you want to be like all her friends who were American friends who go out on dates, and she was not allowed.
Of course.
So it was a turmoil of how you had to adjust to these challenges that faced you.
Right, keeping up with the traditions and keeping up with the way, you know, your parents thought you should be brought up, and a completely different culture.
Absolutely. Right.
Going on to the next review. This is an inspiring story of two people, worlds apart, finding each other, overcoming obstacles, and creating a family that winds up in Connecticut. It starts off depicting a terrible time in history and brings the reader to a much better place. The story is told in a way that has you feeling as though you were right there with them. And I felt the same way when I read the book. I enjoyed all the local references to places familiar to me in Connecticut.
Well, that's true, because in the book is the Bond Hotel where my parents met.
Right.
And there's Sisson Avenue and Franklin Avenue, Farmington Avenue, all those places that still people are familiar with today.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Like I related as I was reading the book, I was picturing in my head all the different places.
Right, that's right.
Another review. I read the book cover to cover as soon as I received it. It's insightful and wonderfully written, an easy read. It's all about a real-life family caught up in old world traditions while struggling to assimilate to the new. Coming to America from Greece, Mother Cynthia finds she's tragically widowed on the same day of her arrival with her young daughters. Now the male head of the family, son John, wields with an iron fist over mother and sisters, taking advantage of them emotionally and financially. But a feisty Virginia resists the old way of proxenia, or matchmaking, and meets the love of her life, George Avak, an Armenian. He eventually wins over the resistant Greek family and provides a secure and peaceful place in American society for his wife and his children. But he is forever scarred and haunted by the memories of the slaughter of his family at the hands of the Turks in 1911. A worthwhile read because his story, told through his daughter and the author of the book, is a story of a triumph of the spirit.
That's very nice, too. Very nice. Well, my mom was a match made with a man from her town, because in the 1920s, you had to marry someone that your family picked for you. So how do you pick someone from your little teeny town, and you're in the United States? The pickings were very slim. But it was a match, and until my mother and her whole family went to a Greek dance at the Bond Hotel, and my father walked in. It was love at first sight. So the story goes on from there, that the challenges that they met, because you're supposed to marry a Greek from your hometown, and here's somebody who's Armenian. So they did not accept him until, time passed.
Right. What a beautiful ending to the story.
So it was. And through my father's life, the sadness that he felt periodically, he had really no one to share it with. He didn't have a mother, he didn't have a father, he didn't have cousins, uncles, but he did have a close friend, Mr. Adasian, who went through the same thing. He had 3 sisters who were killed, and his parents were killed during the Armenian genocide. And so they would meet, we would go to their house every Sunday, and they would sit together and listen to Armenian music, Turkish music, and sit and reminisce and cry.
Of course.
And I was a little kid, I never really understood it. And my father would say to me, "Oh, Gloria, I'm so happy that I can go to bed at night and stretch my feet to the end of the bed." I never really understood what it meant. And he said, "No one's going to come and hurt me or my family." So as I got older, everything started to make sense, little bits and pieces. He never talked about it. He never, cried to me, but he would cry to those Armenians who experienced the same thing.
And who understood where he was coming from.
Right.
I can't imagine living in fear every day in those years.
Well, yeah, it was, you know, the Ottoman Empire, which is, from doing my research, is the largest empire in the history of the world. So their empire went all across to Asia Minor and Iran and Pakistan. I mean, they just were taking over the whole world. And then part of the Ottoman Empire is the Young Turks, who came into power. And in 1911, they started these edicts of if you were not a Turkish Muslim, you were more heavily taxed. If you were not Turkish Muslim, you were Christian, you could not carry a weapon. If you were not Turkish Muslim, you could not hold office. So all these restrictions were put on Christians, and if you had a passage to leave, to get out of where you were, that was good, but the people who were poor could not get out.
Right.
And then in 1915 was the genocide of the Armenians, which from 1915 to 1917, 1.6 million Armenians perished. So this is the background that my dad came from, and to be in this country and to be a success, to own a business, to own a home, to have a car, to put his children through school, this was a success for him.
Of course.
So from the dark to the light side of the book.
Of course. And what the American dream, as we say, right?
The American dream.
Coming from so many obstacles and hardships and working, and it was the American dream, and he raised his family in America, here in Connecticut.
Here in Connecticut, right.
What a wonderful story, and truly. So we know how you came up with the dark and the light side of the moon.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how it happened. I was, my husband and I were in the car with my granddaughter. She was sitting in the back. And I was in the process of writing the book, and we pulled in the driveway, and she got out of the back seat of the car, closed the door, and looked up at the sky. And she said, "Oh, look, Yaya, I could see the dark side of the moon." And we looked up, and a cloud had come in front of the moon, and you could just see the outline of the black moon, just the outline of the moon, bright. And I said, "Gee, that's the name of my book."
Oh, my.
Right there it happened. So she had a little part in it, too.
That's special. So what motivated you to actually write the book?
Okay. I had thought about it for years. You know, I knew I had a story. You know, my mother and father had passed away, and I knew that, but I didn't know how I was actually going to go about it. And, you know, something else always comes into your mind. And I was at a funeral, and a distant cousin came to me, and she said, "Gloria, I saw where your grandfather is buried." Now, this is the grandfather on my mother's side.
Okay.
Who died when my mother got here. And I said, "You did?" She said, "In Ansonia, Connecticut." So I said to my husband, "Let's go down and we'll see where my grandfather was buried." So we went down, we saw the grave, we went to the archives, we saw his name written, and then we went to town hall and we got the actual newspaper that announced that he had died. So I said, this gave me the impetus to say, let's do it. So then I joined a writer's group, and we've been together for about 11 years, and we critique each other's work, and by critiquing you learn, and came up with the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great. Isn't it amazing how you go back and you find these things? I mean, you must have been,
well, it took me 6 years to write the book because of all the research, and you know, you put pieces together of what you heard, and I interviewed people too, and the things that you know in the back of your mind, but it never came, you didn't think that much about it. But everything that happened in my life as I was writing the book came to me.
Yeah, and you remembered things
and I
too,
could
growing
remember
up.
things growing up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
So you grew up here in West Hartford, I believe.
That's correct. West Hartford's my hometown.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it's exciting to be here in Town Hall. This was Hall High. This is from where I graduated.
Okay.
So, and from there I went to Hart School, and my background is music, and I sing, and I play the piano, and I still tap dance every week over here at the Elmwood Community Center.
How wonderful is that?
Yeah, we dance and we
for
have
you.
a wonderful time, and it's good exercise, and it's enjoyable. So I do that, and I have sung in, you know, when I went to Hart, you put your name on a board if you were available to sing. So I was busy. I sang, I'm a classical singer, so I sang at a lot of churches, a lot of, you know, commemorative places if they needed the Lord's Prayer, or if they needed the Star Spangled Banner, or in churches, you know, certain hymns that a bride might want. So I did that all through school, too. And I still sing at my church.
Of course, and you have a beautiful voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
We listen to you on Sundays.
Yeah, I love singing. That's what I do.
Have you written anything else, or are you writing
Yes.
anything else?
Yep, I'm writing a memoir at the moment.
Okay.
And I've also participated in 2 anthologies that have been published, and I'm working on a 3rd anthology. And I've written articles and contributed to publications as well. So I'm still writing, and I take courses. I'm presently enrolled in a course at Wethersfield High School. So.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, or?
Well, my memoir, it's really a spin-off of this book.
Oh, okay.
It's what happened after.
Okay.
So that's a continuation.
Oh,
sort
wonderful.
of
I
what
can't
I'm
wait to
doing.
read it.
So that's what I'm presently working on. But writing, you know, people think it's easy. It's not easy. It's hard. And but while the beauty of it is when you have something to say and it comes out, and you, after rewriting and then editing, and then all that process is really exciting. But when it comes together and you're happy with it, that's euphoric. It's really, really, it's very rewarding.
I always wonder this, what method you use when you write. I always wonder, do you use a computer? Do you write shorthand? How do you?
Well, when I first started to write, I wrote on lined paper and then transposed it into the computer. But now I just use straight computer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's much easier, and it flows much more easily.
And you go back and you edit.
And then, then you go back and edit when you're, you know, pretty much finished. But the editing comes really later. But I also find that, you know, I keep a pad and pencil next to my bed, because sometimes something will come to you and you write it down so that the next morning it's fresh in your mind, what you've written down, and then you go to the computer and you write it. So I find that that's something that I do often too.
And I'm sure you remember things, or when you're at peace and you're thinking.
Right. Well, you know, you think a lot, you know, just before you fall asleep. A lot of things come to you.
Right.
So that's usually a pretty good time, you know, to get some special thoughts down.
What kind of books do you like to read?
I love to read nonfiction. And I write nonfiction.
I do too.
But a good book is a good book. So if you have a really good writer and it's fiction, I love to read that too. I read a lot, and I think that reading a lot helps you write too.
Absolutely. Well, I really enjoyed reading your book.
Thank you.
I read it twice.
Thank you.
And I just couldn't put it down.
Thank you so much.
The story is, I couldn't even imagine that happening in today's world. And just, you know, I have pictures in my mind, and I still, when you read a book, you remember certain parts of it. And the part that really stuck to me was you know, your father as a little boy watching his family get murdered in front of him, his mother hiding him so that he, you know, he would be safe, and your mother, you know, coming to Ellis Island. And I remember a part of the book where everybody was coming to pick up their families, you know, coming from Greece, and they were almost the last ones there, and she kept looking at the door waiting for someone to come through, waiting for her father, and he never came. And you know, that's just heartbreaking. I mean, I can't even imagine as a little girl and as a little boy going through that. So
well, you know, it is the American dream that you could experience these things, and yet only in America can you find this freedom and this, you know, who would have thought that after my father had, you know, been orphaned that way, that he could come here and be a success and have a successful business and have a family.
right.
And put his children through school. And it is a success story.
It
you
certainly
know, and
is.
it's a tribute to the United States because everybody wants to come here.
Of course.
Everybody wants to be an American.
The land of the free.
The land of the free.
True story,
The home
truly.
of the brave. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gloria.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh,
I
it was an
appreciate
honor
it.
to interview you
Thank you.
today.
Thank you.
And if you would like to read Gloria's book, it's available on www.amazon.com, The Dark and the Light Side of the Moon by Gloria Pitchell. And if you would like to reach Gloria and have questions for her, you can reach her at her email, which is gloriapitchell@aol.com, or www.facebook.com/Gloria Pitchell. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria.